In today's video, we are going to be reviewing the Dark Angels Combo Patrol box. We are going to be talking about points, upgrades, and all that good stuff. But most importantly, we are going to be talking about whether it's worth it to buy it for Combo Patrol in specific, or whether it's a better buy or also a good buy to upgrade it later on to a 1000 points quote-unquote full 40k list or a full Dark Angels army. Let's get into the video. First up, let's answer the most asked questions I get about new Combo Patrol boxes, especially if they are replacing a previous box and so on. So what we have in front of us is the new Dark Angels Combo Patrol box, and this one is in fact replacing the old Dark Angels Combo Patrol box that I've been praising for the past 3 years now. So the old Combo Patrol with the Redemptor Dreadnought, the Inceptors, 5 Intercessors as well as a Chaplain is going away and is going to go out of print. Now, the good thing is that at the time of recording, you can still find them. I've seen some in my local GW store. I've seen some online. Many different stores still stock them. So if you're interested in getting one of those, or maybe the new one and the old one, now would be the time to order them because they are still very popular and I think they are going to go out of stock everywhere relatively soon. This is not to kind of incite FOMO. You can buy whatever you want. If you don't need any more miniatures because you have a lot of them, obviously don't buy more miniatures. You don't need a bigger pile of shame just because I'm telling you that something is going to go out of print. Don't worry, you can still buy a separate Redemptor Dreadnought. You can still buy separate Inceptors and then play that old Combo Patrol because the rules are not going anywhere. So while the old Combo Patrol is going to go out of print, the rules are going to stay current and active until at least the end of 10th edition, which is at least another 2.5 years. So the rules are not something that GW can just take away from us. So yeah, the rules are existing. 10th edition is still around for quite a while, so the rules are going to stay around as well. Last but not least, everything else is more or less the same. You can use both Combo Patrol boxes, the old Dark Angels one and the new Dark Angels one, for Combo Patrol, for regular 40k. All the models are legal in both formats. You can upgrade them, you can buy them both and use them for one singular force. If you wanted to, that would be a great buy considering both of them have the same upgrade sprues and you can use them perfectly for a Dark Angel specific force, which is really nice. And yeah, everything else is very much compatible. You can play both of those Combo Patrol boxes against each other, which could also be a fun matchup, which I've played and I can confirm it's kind of cool. And yeah, that's basically all there is to say about the new versus the old Combo Patrol. We are going to compare them a little bit later on when it comes to points and savings and so on, just so you get a better picture and you can see what exactly is getting replaced and why I held the old Dark Angels Combo Patrol box in such high regards. But for now, I think that should answer all the basic questions. So without further ado, let's talk about the new Dark Angels Combo Patrol box in specific. What we are getting here summarized is a new Combo Patrol box for Space Marines. You can use it for any Space Marine chapter, but you are getting upgrade sprues specifically for Dark Angels, and you are getting 19 models in total. There is no cohesive theme here. There are no Dark Angel specific units in this box, so you can still use it for any chapter. This is something that you could see as a benefit, or as something that you could see as a point of criticism, where GW has recently released a lot of Dark Angels models and we are not getting any of the Dark Angels specific models in here, which is a little bit of a shame. Furthermore, we are not getting any Terminators or anything which I consider to be very iconic for Dark Angels. Instead, we are getting Blade Guard Veterans, which are kind of taking the role, but not really. They do wear bone-colored armor and they kind of fit into the Deathwing, but they are not as iconic as Terminators. Last but not least, this entire box is going to get you 455 points, which in this day and age I consider to be very solid, considering, you know, there are some Combo Patrols out there that are not even reaching 300 points. So anything above 400 these days is kind of a win, which is just, you know, it's a product of its time. We are going down when it comes to specific values and when it comes to points. The price is thankfully going to stay the same across the board. So unless there's going to be another price increase for GW, which I hope there's not going to be one this year, we are still going to stay at £95, 125 euros, $160, and so on. The last important thing to mention as far as the summary goes is that you're only going to get 2 of the old upgrade sprue. as compared to one of the new ones. And this is a weird decision from GW, considering that with the old upgrade sprue, you would have had enough shoulder pads for every model in the box. Meanwhile, with the two of the older upgrade sprues, you're going to find yourself missing a few shoulder pads. Furthermore, the older upgrade sprues are just not that exciting. Meanwhile, the new one has a ton of different additional bits, weapons, and upgrades for later models that you might pick up down the line, like a plasma weapon for Terminators and so on. So this is a little bit of a weird choice. I was definitely expecting them to include the new upgrade sprue in the Combat Patrol box. That didn't happen. So yeah, there's definitely something worth mentioning. If you plan to buy this box and go with Dark Angels, you are going to be missing a few shoulder pads. Next up, we are going to talk about the Combat Patrol itself and my experience with it, as well as the rules. So the loadout for this particular Combat Patrol is interesting simply because they kept it very, very straightforward and simple. So no grenade launchers for your intercessors, no additional plasma weapons for any sergeants, and your Blade Guard veterans are exactly what you see, namely heavy bolt pistol and power weapon all across the board. And for your captain, you're going to be running the chainsword as well as the power fist, and that's basically that. So as far as the setup goes, it is very simple, especially new players are going to come to appreciate that, because even though intercessors and so on are very simple, you do have some options like the grenade launcher and so on to make them a little bit more complex. So now that we know what we are getting and the loadouts of our units, let's talk about the units one by one so we get a better feel of the rules and so on later on once we talk about them. So first up, we have our Captain Gravis armor. This unit is a little bit of a conundrum because, you know, they could have included any of the 20 lieutenants we have, any of the 20 other captains we have. So you could have had something to attach to your intercessors or to your, plasma unit and so on. But they decided to give you a Gravis unit without any further Gravis models within this particular box. So he's going to be on his own. That's going to be somewhat supported by rules, but I think it's just a weird choice for this particular box. That doesn't mean though that this model is weak. So as you can see, we have a Boltstorm Gauntlet. This one is just a super solid 3 shot, strength 4, AP -1, damage 1. Works. You're hitting on 2s across the board. Same applies to your melee weapons. You have a ton of attacks with your Power Fist and then a few additional attacks with your Chainsword with the extra attack special rule. So you're going to potentially get a few more attacks out of your Relic Chainsword. And the damage, as well as the AP and so on, and the strength are decent. So overall, your Captain Gravis armor is not only tanky, but can also dish out quite a bit of damage. And the tankiness is further supported by Refuse to Yield. Each time an attack is allocated to this model, half the damage characteristic of that attack. So most of the time that is not going to come to bear, but some armies have especially a lot of damage to weapons, and in that case it is going to be quite helpful to have your, captain and warlord on the battlefield for a little bit longer. Overall, I think that, I like Gravis units. I like the Gravis captain as well. The model is quite flexible. You are getting another power fist that you can equip, another power weapon, or the chainsword, and overall different helmets and so on. So it's a nice model, but it just doesn't make any sense for this particular box. And I wonder why they decided to go with a Gravis unit over just a regular captain or a regular lieutenant. The tinfoil hat theory for that is obviously that they want you to go out after buying the Combat Patrol and after playing with it for a little bit and buy further Gravis units, like for example aggressors or eradicators, so you have something to attach them to once you play your first 1000 points game. But we will never know what the designers or, the suits at GW thought whenever they decided for this choice. Next up, we have our intercessors. You have 10 of them, so you can split them up with patrol squads into 2 different units. And in 99% of the cases, that is definitely something that I would advise, because you have nothing to attach to them. You are not getting any further force multiplier out of them except for stratagems. If you are considering running any of the stratagems we are going to talk about a little bit later, and if you want to maximize their value, at that point you could consider running 10 intercessors, but most of the time it is a good idea to have a little bit more OC to go around on the battlefield, and having 2 squads with OC2 or just battle line as well, because they grant sticky objectives in Combat Patrol, is definitely a benefit. As far as the weapons go, it's exactly what you expect. We have a bolt rifle with assault and heavy. We have our basic 3 close combat weapon attacks for our intercessors. And there's really nothing to mention here other than you obviously don't have the grenade keyword in Combat Patrol or any of those shenanigans. So you're not going to get any additional mortal wounds out of them or anything. They are as vanilla as it gets, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but yeah, The only thing to really consider with them is, do you want to keep them as a 10-man squad because of stratagems and because, you want to get the most value out of your command points, or do you want to split them up to gain more control on the battlefield, which is, I feel, usually the better idea. Next up, we have our Hellblaster squad, and these guys have decent weapons and the exact same stat line as our intercessors. So a 3-up save, 2 wounds, toughness 4, everything else is exactly the same. So what you're bringing them for are the weapons. The Plasma Incinerator, you have 2 different modes. You can choose between standard and supercharge. Once you use supercharge, you're obviously going to be forced to make hazardous rolls to potentially, kill some of your own models. But at times it could be worth it. Most of the time, I would just use the Plasma Incinerator vanilla, because making those hazardous roll while the, percentages or probabilities to kill your own models is relatively low, it really hurts whenever it happens. So, make calculated choices with your damage 2, AP -3, and strength 8. Against intercessors, for example, it could make sense. Other targets, maybe less. So, yeah, definitely make calculated decisions here. Furthermore, the Hellblaster squad has close combat weapons, has bolt pistols, everything else is standard. They lost their ability to shoot back whenever they die. That is a rule they have in full 40k. That doesn't happen in Combat Patrol. Not 100% sure whether there was a balancing reason behind it. Obviously, Hellblasters shooting back whenever they die is very strong. On the other hand, I wouldn't consider this Combat Patrol to be overpowered or broken or any of that sort. I think it's one of the weaker ones, to be completely honest. And, having given them the ability to shoot back whenever they die would have not been overpowered and would have not disrupted the flow of the game by too much, at least in my opinion. So, as they are now in Combat Patrol, they are rather vanilla. You're bringing intercessors with bigger weapons. That's what they are, and that's what you're going to get. And last but not least, we have our 3 Blade Guard veterans. They are quite tanky at toughness 4, a 3-up save, a 4 vulnerable save, and 3 wounds. And they are going to take a lot of fire before they go down, which is definitely a benefit. As far as their damage output goes, it is a little bit mediocre, I would say. So the heavy bolt pistols, remember you can use them in melee as well, or whenever you are engaged in melee combat. And you have your mastercrafted power swords, which do have a damage of 2 and an AP of 2, so they are nothing to scoff at. But they are also struggling a little bit against like real threats that have toughness 6 or 7, which can happen in some combat patrols, most notably the Adeptus Custodes, for example. Some orc models like the Death Dread and so on have higher toughness, and at that point you're only going to be wounding on 5s, and that is going to be a little bit more problematic. But thankfully, they retained their Blade Guard ability, which says at the start of the fight phase, you can select one of the following abilities to apply to models in this unit until the end of the phase. You have Swords of the Chapter, which says each time a model in this unit makes a melee attack, reroll the hit roll of 1. Now, this is obviously supposed to help with reliability. Now, sadly, since you cannot attach anything to them, you are also not getting any rules that help you to fish for specific things like extra attacks or anything. So the reroll of a 1 is as good as it gets for now, but later on in full 40k, you are definitely going to make more use out of this particular rule. And then we have Shields of the Chapter. Each time an invulnerable saving throw is made for a model in this unit, reroll a saving throw roll of 1. And this one can also be very, very helpful, especially if you are expecting to get hit by a lot of damage 2 or damage 3 attacks. Having the option to reroll one of those invulnerable saves can be critical. So, but whether you should use Swords of the Chapter or Shields of the Chapter is highly dependent on the situation, and I can't just tell you what is generally the best thing to do. It really depends on what you're going to get attacked with and what you're dealing with when it comes to your offense. So yeah, there is sadly no generic statement I can make here to help you make the better choice between the two, because both of them definitely have their use and both of them are quite strong. And that's it for the basic units. As you've seen, they are very vanilla, very basic. There's really not a lot to say about them. So let's talk about the rules. Let's see how they interact with them, and let's see if they make them a little bit better, or yeah, what they change about the units that we have and how we view them. So the first rule we have is obviously Oath of Moment. You pick an enemy unit, and all your units that are shooting or attacking them are going to get a reroll to their hit roll. At that point, obviously, if you are attacking an Oath of Moment target, you're not going to use the Swords of the Chapter with your Blade Guard veterans because you're already rerolling your hit roll, and you cannot reroll a reroll. That is something very important to keep in mind. So whenever you attack something that is an out-of-moment target with your Blade Guard veterans, always use Shield of the Chapter so you get a little bit of a bonus for your invulnerable saving throws. Other than that, there's really nothing to mention about out-of-moment, and it's just your basic Space Marine army rule. Next up, we have the enhancements for our Gravis Captain. We have 2 of them, as always, 1 default, 1 optional, and the default enhancement reads Determined Combatant. While the bearer is within an objective marker range, weapons equipped by the bearer have the Sustained Hits 1 ability. This can be very helpful dependent on whether you want to play rather defensively with them and keep them on your home objective and maybe deter your opponent from using deep striking abilities, or if you want to use them offensively, which I would recommend in this particular case, and take back objectives and kill stuff, because your Gravis Captain just standing in the back is going to have trouble against ranged units, and instead is going to shine in melee where their weapons are just very, very strong. So I would definitely recommend to use Determined Combatant in an offensive fashion and just move along, take back objectives, and kill stuff with Sustained Hits 1 on all your weapons. I wouldn't say that this is a very strong enhancement. It is very specific to just your captain, and that is exactly what we expected because you cannot attach them to any unit. But I was expecting something a little bit more hard-hitting than Sustained Hits 1, and while it is noticeable whenever you pick it, the restriction that you have to be within range of an objective marker and so on makes it very meh. It is technically a good thing, but it's not enough in my opinion, and you still have restrictions to when you can use it. And it's a little bit too much of a nerf or too much of a restriction for an ability that just grants Sustained Hits 1. It's just a little bit boring. Then we have the optional enhancement which reads Wages of Retribution. This one says, each time an Adeptus Astartes model from your army destroys an out-of-moment target, if the bearer is on the battlefield, roll 1d6. On a 4-up, you gain 1 CP. Very similar to Determined Combatant. Here you still have a lot of requirements you have to meet. The captain or the person or model that has the enhancement still has to be on the battlefield. Then you have to roll a d6. On a 4-up, you gain 1 CP. You have to have destroyed your Oath of Moment target, and so on. So both enhancements, in my opinion, are definitely on the weaker scale. I would put them relatively low on any kind of enhancement tier list if I were ever to make something like this for Combat Patrol, and I'm not a big fan of either of them. You have some options and some default choices that you can go with when it comes to enhancements. So whenever you play against a Combat Patrol that has a ton of different units that you can kill relatively easily as your Oath of Moment targets, like Gene Stealer Quills, they have a ton of units that are squishy, the regular Tyranid Combat Patrol, Chaos Demons, and so on. Wages of Retribution at least has some merit to it. Against any Combat Patrol that has very, very few units, like Grey Knights and so on, I would definitely just pick Determined Combatant and hope for the best. But as I said, both enhancements, not a big fan. Next up, we have our secondary objectives, and these are significantly more interesting. So first up, we have our default secondary objective, Hunters of Heretics, which reads, each time an Adeptus Astartes model or unit from your army destroys an enemy character model, you score 5 victory points. At the end of battle, if all enemy character models are destroyed, you score 5 victory points. This one could be very, very strong, and I have made a lot of kind of victory points with this one, especially against Combat Patrols that have 2 rather squishy characters, like for example the Tau Combat Patrol. But also just Combat Patrols which make it very easy to kill the character because they are a frontliner, they have to be out there, and you can make an easy 10 victory points with this one, and that is very strong as far as secondary objectives go. Not a lot of secondary objectives grant your opponent, whatever Combat Patrol they are playing, more than 10 additional victory points. So having this one, definitely not bad. But some Combat Patrols with 2 characters, like the vanilla Space Marine one with the Terminator Captain and the Terminator Librarian, for example, are excellent choices against this one. Obviously, you have to somewhat focus both of them to get the last kind of point or bullet point where you have to kill all enemy characters, but it's definitely worth it. If you kill 2 characters, you're getting 15 victory points, and that is a lot for Combat Patrol. That's really a lot, and there's almost no secondary objective that can keep up with that at that point. And as far as our secondary objective goes, it reads, take the stronghold. Before the battle, at the start of the deploy army step, your opponent must select one objective marker that is not in their deployment zone. At the end of your turn, you score 5 victory points if you control the selected objective marker. Now this one goes a little bit hand in hand with our default enhancement. So if you're standing there on that particular objective that your opponent designated with your captain, they are going to get sustained hits, it's going to be difficult to take that objective back, and so on. But overall, I'm very happy that both secondary objectives play relatively differently. So you pick the top one if you feel good about taking down their character and if you're fine with just 10 victory points, which is absolutely solid. And you pick the other one if you think that your opponent is going to have trouble contesting your objectives. Whatever they pick, you are probably going to overpower them because you bring a lot of OC2 units. They are quite durable. Intercessors, you know, they are a little bit vanilla and boring, but they are still toughness 4, 3-up, save, 2 wounds, and so on. And they have an OC of 2, so they are absolutely fine. So taking the stronghold against armies that struggle with board control, like Grey Knights and so on, even though they are teleporting around, they just don't have that many units. Take the stronghold is going to be excellent. I wouldn't take the stronghold against armies like Genestealer Cults or the basic Tyranid Combat Patrol, simply because they have way too many bodies, and while you can kill them relatively easily, you cannot guarantee that it works out the way you planned. So at that point, you have to make calculated decisions, but I think it is relatively obvious which of the two secondary objectives you should pick against which particular combat patrol. If you have any particular questions as far as secondary objectives and your choices go, or matchup related questions, definitely drop them down in the comments below and I'll try my best to answer them. And last but not least, we have our 3 stratagems. We have Unyielding. This one you use in your fight phase, and it's basically a fight on death, but your blade guards are going to be getting an easier fight on death. They are going to be instead fighting on death on a 3-up instead of a 4-up. It's an okay stratagem, especially for your Blade Guard veterans, for your intercessors and so on, for your Hellblasters. It's just not that interesting. And I've not made a lot of positive kind of impact on the battlefield with this particular stratagem. Because usually whenever you want to use it, just one Blade Guard veteran dies, because as I said in the unit overview, they are very, very tanky and combat patrols are not as skilly as other formats. So your opponent is really going to struggle to take down 2 of them. And yeah, whenever that happens, you can attack with 2 of them back because they died, but that is going to happen very, very rarely. So usually you use Unyielding, 1 Blade Guard veteran gets to attack, maybe because they died, you still have to roll a d6, and then you can attack back with 4 attacks, and that's basically that. So I'm not the biggest fan of this particular stratagem. It is fine, but it is nothing to write home about. Then we have March of Vengeance. This one you use in your fight phase again. And you pick 1 unit from your army, and whenever it makes a consolidation move, it can move 6 inches rather than 3. That is a very helpful movement tool. I've made extensive use of this one, and I'm a fan of this one simply because it barely has any restrictions for once, and it just works as intended. So March of Vengeance is very, very good. 6 inches or 3 makes a huge difference, especially on a small combat patrol board where consolidating to an objective is way easier because they're all a little bit more bunched up. Consolidating into your other opponent's unit is relatively easy, and so on. So March of Vengeance is quite strong, and I really like this stratagem. And last but not least, we have Relic Munitions. You use it in your shooting phase. You pick 1 of your units, and until the end of the phase, ranged weapons equipped by models in your unit, excluding plasma incinerators, have the lethal hits ability. And this is the stratagem I talked about in our unit overview, where we've talked about whether it is worth it or not to keep your intercessors in 2 separate units or run them in 1 large unit. If you want to run your intercessors in a 10-man squad, you have to have a plan together with Relic Munitions to make it worth it. Because usually you want to play objective control, you want to have terrain control, and you want to stay on as many objectives as possible and tag them and sticky them. If you run them in a huge 10-man squad, that is going to be a lot more difficult, and at that point you have to make as much use of Relic Munitions as possible. Now, Relic Munitions is only viable against armies that are bringing bigger threats, especially any stuff that is toughness 5 or more, and you are going to find a ton of combat patrols that have that. Orcs, for example, the basic Orc Boy has toughness 5, so their lethal hits already bring something to the table. Then you have Death Dreads and so on. You have Adeptus Custodes. A ton of different combat patrols have a lot of toughness, and at that point, wounding is going to be a little bit more difficult. Lethal hits can help with that. So are there specific matchups where I would recommend this? I think I would do it against Adeptus Custodes, simply because deleting the sisters is going to be very, very simple. And at that point, if they are bringing bikes or if they are bringing just regular Custodes guard, it is going to be a great stratagem against either of them. So yeah, there are definitely matchups against which, you know, keeping 10 intercessors and using relic munitions makes sense. For most of them, for the vast majority of matchups, just splitting your intercessors in 2 squads makes a lot more sense. And that's it for the rules. I've played 7 games with this particular combat patrol, and my opinion on this one is a little bit mixed. So the models themselves are not bad, but as you can see with this combat patrol, if you take a look at it, it's a ton of infantry. And as I said, over the past few months, we are making a huge shift as far as combat patrol goes, from any vehicles or walkers down to pure infantry, and it's going to feel more and more like boarding actions as we progress throughout 10th edition. Furthermore, we are going to kind of move a little bit closer to it feels like Kill Team. Obviously, the rules are very different from Kill Team, but as far as the models you're using go, as far as the kits you're buying for Kill Team go, they are going to be looking more and more similar to what you can use in Combat Patrol. And depending on what the White Dwarf Combat Patrols in the future look like for example, the Rogue Trader Combat Patrol, that one features probably a lot of Adeptus Arbites and so on. And these are Kill Team units that a lot of people may already have. And if they want to move up to Combat Patrol, it is going to be very easy for them to get maybe a unit of Navy Breachers and have a Combat Patrol ready. And that's something that is really cool to consider. But, you know, this one is strong against other Combat Patrols that were recently released or designed recently. Like, for example, our recent White Dwarf Combat Patrol. So Strike Team Solarian, or the Tyranids, Insidious Infiltrators, and so on, or the basic Leviathan combat patrols. Against those, this one is excellent because they're kind of balanced against each other. If you want to run this particular combat patrol into Eldari or into the older Dark Angels combat patrol, you're going to struggle with this, because as soon as your Hellblasters are gone, you are out of luck as far as just taking out bigger units goes. And at that point, all you have are your intercessors, potentially lethal hits with a stratagem, and that's basically that. So it feels balanced against combat patrols that have released recently. Against older, very strong combat patrols, it doesn't hold a candle to them, and that is exactly what we've seen with literally all the recent combat patrols. The verdict on them as far as tactics go, as far as rules go, is always the same. It is always, yes, this is fun against current combat patrols. Against older combat patrols that are very strong, Eldari, Dark Angels, Genestealer cults, this one is going to struggle. And as far as the tier list goes, this is probably going to be middle of the pack, maybe a little bit lower. And that's basically the ranking for this box as far as rules go. Next up, let's talk a little bit about lists. So as I said previously, you are getting 455 points with this new Dark Angels combat patrol. Meanwhile, the old Dark Angels combat patrol netted you 480 points. That is not a big difference. It is not noteworthy, but I still wanted to give you the direct comparison between the two. And now you also have both of the lists next to each other to compare them a little bit. I still really like the old Dark Angels combat patrol, and I think it is an excellent way to go into Dark Angels by buying both these combat patrols. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and spend a bunch of money, as always. No FOMO here or anything. But if you were to have a lot of money on your hand, and if you are interested in playing Dark Angels or Space Marines for that matter, both of these combat patrols mesh together very, very well. And we are going to look at the list here. And as you can see, we are sitting at 935 points. It is a solid list. All that you're really missing is an Gravis unit. You can attach your Captain Gravis armor. Getting a Gravis unit and squeezing it into 65 points is going to be nigh impossible. So you're going to make some changes here if you want to pick up some aggressors. But overall, it's a relatively decent list. You can just, you know, play with just 10 intercessors and instead put some aggressors in there. If you want to run it as is and have your just Captain Gravis armor run around on their own at 1000 points in a casual game, who cares? All you need to pick up at that point is potentially an apothecary or something, and it works perfectly. But my recommendation, if you really want to upgrade this one to any points value above just combat patrol level, is to get a unit that has the Gravis keyword, and it allows your captain to attach to them, like eradicators, aggressors, and so on. And while we are talking about the graphics cap not being able to attach to anything, let's talk about whether this box is worth it to be picked up twice. And in my opinion, the answer is a clear no. As far as the units go, you have 2 captains and Gravis armor, which is not horrible. You know, you have different options for them and so on, but you really don't need 2 of them. Furthermore, 20 intercessors are not horrible either, but you are going to get them if you are going to be a Space Marine player in almost any other box. So if you were to get any other combat patrol and so on, you're probably going to find intercessors in there, and it's just better. If you down the line pick up a Christmas box, for example, there are going to be intercessors in there. So you don't need 20 intercessors right now. You're going to get them down the line for sure. And then as far as 6 Blacker veterans go, that's nice to have. 10 Hellblasters, that's also nice to have. So it really comes down to the 20 intercessors and having the Captain Gravis armor twice. In my opinion, I would not pick this up twice, and instead, if I have the money, opt for the older Dark Angels Combat Patrol, which seems ideal to me, or pick up any of the other combat patrols that are Space Marine related and have a little bit more variety and potentially Gravis units. The Blood Angels Combat Patrol has Gravis units and meshes quite well. You have the Deathwatch Combat Patrol, which also has Gravis units, and so on. You have a ton of options in there. Don't buy this one twice. And while we are talking about the Space Marine Combat Patrols, which would I recommend to go together with this one? I think the Blood Angels and the Deathwatch work beautifully with this one and make a lot of sense. The old Dark Angels one with the Redemptor Dreadnought, as I said, makes a lot of sense as well. As far as Space Wolves go, or just Black Templars maybe, I don't think those two mesh particularly well with this one. So if you were to go for another combat patrol, I would strongly recommend Blood Angels, Deathwatch, or the older Dark Angels Combat Patrol. All 3 of these are excellent options. Meanwhile, the other 2 just don't make a lot of sense. Now, as far as other upgrades go, for 1000 points list, for example, maybe you pick up this Combat Patrol and you already have a Leviathan half for Space Marines. That would lend itself perfectly to create a 1000 points list, as you can see here. And all you need to add on top of that are some aggressors, because sadly, Leviathan did not feature any Gravis units, so yeah, you need to go out of your way to get them separately. But other than that, the Apothecary Biologist can, together with the Gravis Captain, attach to the aggressors. The Captain Terminator armor can obviously attach to the Terminators. Those fit very well with the Deathwing design and the color scheme, the bone color scheme. And all the other units are also quite cool. The Inferno Squad and so on. It meshes all very well and makes for a fairly fun 1000 point list, and it's very easy to get if you already have Leviathan. Now lastly, as far as my personal recommendation goes, I would pick up this particular Combat Patrol together with the Blood Angels Combat Patrol, as well as some Eradicators, and that's basically that. You're getting a Librarian, you are getting 5 additional Intercessors, so you're going to have enough at 15. You are getting some aggressors in there. And the only unit I really added on top are the Eradicators, which I think make a lot of sense. You need some anti-tank firepower in this particular list, and they do a great job at that. So this list I had a lot of fun running. I've played 2 or 3 games with this one and was fairly successful in a casual environment. And it is definitely a great way to save a little bit of money, because you're combining 2 combat patrols and all you're really buying separately is 1 unit or 1 box of Eradicators. Alright, next up, let's talk about the savings, and we are going to compare the old Dark Angels Combat Patrol to the new one. But first up, let's take a look at the new one and talk about the savings there. So as you know, we're going to get 2 of the old Dark Angels upgrade sprues. Funnily enough, I didn't have to make too many changes here. The difference is £1 between, them putting in the new upgrade sprue instead of just giving us 2 old ones, but who cares at this point. And as you can see, with the savings, you are saving 30% if you actually have use for the upgrade sprues. Meanwhile, you are saving 18% if you have no use for the upgrade sprues. For the US, it's for some reason a little bit lower, but across the board, it's between, 14 and 18% without the sprues, or 27 to 30% if you make use of the sprues. So it's not horrible, If you buy it as a vanilla Space Marine box because you want to play, I don't know, Blood Angels, or you want to upgrade your Blood Angels or Ultramarines or something, at that point, if there is a single unit you do not need out of this box, the Combat Patrol is not worth it at all at that point. So even if you don't have use for the Gravis Captain, which is the cheapest model in there, or the Hellblasters for that reason, if you don't need any of those, still, I wouldn't recommend buying the Combat Patrol. Instead, buy what you need separately and go from there. if we compare the new Combat Patrol with the old one, you can see that the old one had a little bit more value when it comes to, you know, not making use of the old upgrade sprues. But generally speaking, it is very, very similar. The only difference is, you know, whether you're going to make use of the upgrade sprues or not. And even then, the difference is like 5%, which is admittedly a lot, but it's not that relevant in the overall grand scheme of things. So yeah, both of them are very similar when it comes to value, which is a surprise, I think. And yeah, that's basically all there's to say about it. Savings, mediocre, nothing to write home about, but better than the 20% we got from the Necrons or the Adeptus Mechanicus and so on. Next up, let's talk a little bit about different formats. So as I previously said, and I've in my other Combat Patrol reviews, I talk about boarding actions quite a lot. If you don't know what it is, look into it. It's a fun format to play, and this Combat Patrol lends itself for that beautifully. It fits just perfectly. You have some Hellblasters for flavor. You have some Blade Guard veterans, which are excellent because you're fighting on or between tight corridors, and having melee there is great. Your Gravis Cap not being able to attach to anything is excellent for boarding actions because it doesn't matter there. It's just a really good box for boarding actions. And the terrain is still available. GW seems to be further supporting it. Recent White Dwarf magazines had just rules for 10th edition boarding actions and so on. So it's perfect for that. As far as narrative goes, there's really nothing to say about this one because you're not getting any Dark Angel specific units, and that makes it a little bit boring from a narrative perspective. You're not going to get any of the new models. You're not going to get any of the characters, which I think is a bonus because, you know, named characters in a narrative campaign and so on always strike me personally as bad taste, but your mileage may vary. And yeah, overall, it's just, as far as narrative goes, it's a very bland box, and there's really nothing to say here. It works. For your own Space Marine chapter, it could be interesting, but as far as Dark Angels go, it's just bland. So yeah, what do I think? Is this a good Combat Patrol box? Is it good for Combat Patrol? Is it good as a starting point for Space Marines or Dark Angels? What is my final verdict on this one? And I think that for Combat Patrol, it's a very solid box if you match it up against some of the newer Combat Patrols, like for example, the recent ones we've released, Leviathan, Combat Patrols, and so on. If you match it up against the older ones, or if you compare it to the old Dark Angels Combat Patrol box, I don't think it's good enough. Combat Patrols are going to go down in value and appeal, and that's just how it's mostly going to go. Obviously, some Combat Patrols that released in 9th edition have been very bad, and getting a new one is almost certainly going to make them a little bit more interesting. But as far as Dark Angels go, we are losing one of the better Combat Patrols and getting it replaced with this one, which, as I said previously a few times, is rather bland. As far as the rules go, and as far as Combat Patrol goes, it's a nice balanced box that is going to teach you the game very well, and the rules for a casual Combat Patrol game are fine, but they are nothing to write home about. It's not the ideal Combat Patrol box for Space Marines by any means. It is just another Space Marine Combat Patrol box as far as Combat Patrol is concerned. And then, is this box worth it to start a Space Marine army to later get it to 2000 points and upgrade it? Or to just buy it as an expansion for your already existing Space Marine force? And for that, I have to say that probably in most cases not. As an absolute beginner box, it's decent because you are getting your intercessors and so on, and that's absolutely decent. But for veterans, why would you need another 10 intercessors? For me personally, for example, I already happen to own most of these models without even buying it, but I already have 30 intercessors. That is the absolute maximum of them I'm going to run. You obviously can run 60 of them if you wanted to, but you're never going to do that realistically. So if you're a veteran, this box is probably not for you. And thus, the only real appeal for this particular box is for Combat Patrol, which I think it's mediocre at, or as an absolute beginner box if you want to have the basics for infantry for your Space Marines and expand later on. So if you're completely new to a chapter, or if you want to start a new chapter, it's decent. But other than that, the appeal is lost quite quickly. And as far as narrative and other formats go, as I said, for narrative, it's very bland. And for boarding actions, it happens to be one of the better ones. So if you're interested in trying out boarding actions, and if you want to, I don't know, not spend as much money on it or something to just try it out, you can definitely just pick up this Combat Patrol and have a lot of fun with it. And that's one of the stronger points for this Combat Patrol I have to make. So for regular Combat Patrol, I think it's mediocre. As a start of a new army or chapter, it's okay. For veterans, it has no appeal. For narrative players, it has no appeal. And for boarding actions, it's excellent. And that is the final verdict for this one. I think it's okay. I'm not going to pick it up simply because I already have all the models. But overall, yeah, it's just there. It's sad that we see the Redemptor Dreadnought discounted go. The old Dark Angels Combat Patrol box, in my opinion, is way better, but it is what it is. Now, if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments below. I'll gladly answer any of them. If your thoughts differ from mine or anything, as long as you're respectful, drop them down in the comments below. I'll definitely, let you know my opinion, talk about the box with you there, and so on. If you're a Dark Angels player, let me know what you think about this box. I'm always curious to hear what longtime fans of a particular chapter think of these kinds of boxes, and so on. Other than that, as always, you can consider subscribing, giving a thumbs up, and all that good stuff. If you want to see more of this style of content, there is definitely a lot more coming. I'm going to make a lot more casual content and so on. And if you want to support the channel further, follow me on social media or consider supporting on Ko-Fi or Patreon or becoming a member of the channel. And I'm going to use that money to later on enable myself to provide Combat Patrol, battle reports, and all that good stuff. So that's in the works currently. Thank you so much for watching, and I see you in the next one. Take care.